I originally started typing this story in the Vent subreddit, but decided the Let's Not Meet sub fit much better. First off, I need to explain how transportation works in the area where I live. To put it simply, it's absolute shit. There's only one very unreliable public bus that takes you in and out of the residential area, which is very long, by the way. Thus, the residents in this residential area came up with a sort of cab system where you pay by the seat. A little under a year ago, they decided to identify these cabs with a sticker that displays a number stating the car is part of the cab line. Additionally, the drivers are required to have an ID that has the cab line info. Now, here's the story. A couple of times, men have tried to, quote, give me a ride, and I do my best to ignore them. I'll admit, it can absolutely be a bit scary. It doesn't help that my part of the residential area is a little bit isolated, so not many cars or people pass through there. Thus I have to walk alone from my house to the cab line/bus stop. A couple of months ago I was walking from my house to the stop while wearing headphones. This was the first mistake on my part, as I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. A car pulled over next to me, which might sound strange, but know that I use this cab line frequently, and many of the drivers know me. They're nice enough that if they see me, they pull over right by me so I don't have to walk all the way to the stop. This driver asked if I was going to location X, to which I replied yes, and got inside the car without checking the windshield for the ID number. That was mistake number 2. Usually the first cars in the line tend to be older cars with no AC. The car I was in, however, was newer, and when I got in, he locked the doors and turned on the AC. At this point, I finally realized this wasn't one of the cabs, but a complete stranger. He began to ask me personal things such as my name and exact address, as well as other questions you don't ask someone when you first meet them. I responded as vaguely as I could, and all the while my heart rate was skyrocketing. Naturally, I started to panic, so I texted a friend my location and told him to call me ASAP. At this point, we were close to the destination, and this guy was not slowing down the car and was about to pass the stop. Finally, my friend's call came through, and I started to talk to him like he was my boyfriend, purposely and very clearly saying, "Hi baby, I'm almost there. Wait for me and we'll go, okay?" My friend was clearly confused, but when the man heard my conversation, he suddenly stopped the car, saying, "Sorry, I was so entertained talking to you that I almost passed the stop. Maybe we could see each other again." He unlocked the car and I bolted out, barely saying a word. After that day, I started to become more aware of my surroundings and stopped getting in cabs unless I clearly saw the ID. Some of my friends think I'm overreacting, but I don't care. It still scared the shit out of me. And wouldn't you know it, earlier today I was walking from my house to the stop, no headphones on this time, and when I was halfway there, a car started driving slowly next to me. As I'm walking, the driver, an older man, asks me, "Are you Alicia's daughter? Do you live around here?" I responded that I wasn't and kept on walking, but he said he was a neighbor and insisted on giving me a ride. I replied once again that I wasn't who he thought, and again refused the ride. Mind you, my mom's name was not Alicia. Moreover, she has been dead for over a decade. I currently live with my grandma, who people sometimes confuse as my mom, but her name isn't Alicia either. Still, the man kept insisting even though I began walking faster and was approaching the cab line/bus stop where plenty of people were waiting. At this point, the man became angry and yelled this was the last time he would be nice to me and offer a ride. He then sped up and left, and I finally got into a legit cab that took me to my destination. When I got to work, I explained the situation to my boss, who was sure had I gotten in, I'd have been kidnapped. You could say it was a great way to start the morning. And damn it, I really need my own car. I'm currently attending university, but I am staying with my parents at their house for the summer. I was hanging out with one of my friends and we decided to go to a party. I met this guy around my age. We were talking and having fun, but it was nothing too serious, or so I thought. We exchanged phone numbers and hung out a couple of times, but he came incredibly clingy right from the start, so I decided to distance myself in the hope that he would get the hint and back off. Unfortunately, he didn't. After I stopped responding, he sent me over 100 messages, with each message becoming increasingly more aggressive as time went on. Keep in mind, it had been less than 2 weeks since we first met. I finally responded and told him he needed to chill out. He appeared to calm down a bit after I responded, but he then asked for a phone call. I agreed and we talked for a while. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and just a bunch of stuff that is way too intense to say to someone you barely know. I tried to let him down gently, reminding him that I was only home for the summer and wasn't looking for anything serious beyond a fling, but this only made him angrier. He started yelling at me, insulting me, calling me a slut, basically a complete 180 from what he had been saying mere minutes before. Suddenly, the phone went silent. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice, "Bitch, you had better get ready, because I am coming over for you." And then he hung up the phone. This was very frightening, because he knew my parents were out of town for the week, and that I was staying at their house alone. However, he didn't know where my parents' house was, because I was always the one driving. On top of that, he didn't know my friend either, so I thought he had no way of figuring it out. Regardless, I locked all the doors and shut the blinds just in case. After a while, maybe an hour or so, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I looked at my phone and saw a notification on my lock screen. It was from the Ring app, indicating there had been movement on my parents' camera. It was him. If you were to watch the video, you could clearly see something in his hand. When he noticed the camera, however, he left. I immediately blocked him on everything and reported the incident. I had no idea what he planned to do once he got here, and it terrified me to realize that he had come over when I was asleep and defenseless. As I would later find out, he was able to get my address from my phone number. Apparently, he Googled it, and it returned my dad's name as the owner of the phone number, along with my parents' address. Since I'm on my parents' phone plan, my address indicates that I still live here. This revelation was fucking horrifying, as I never knew my phone number could reveal my home address. I'm still extremely upset that this kind of private information is on the internet for anyone to find. It could have gotten me killed. Please learn from my mistakes and do not give anyone your phone number unless you trust them. I found out that you can get a free Google Voice number to text and call people, and that number can't be traced back to you so easily. My advice is to use a disposable number for anyone you're talking to that you meet informally online. Hopefully this never happens to anyone else. I still have trouble sleeping at night. This happened about 20 years ago. I was 9 years old at the time, but my parents have also told me their side of the story on a bunch of different occasions, so that should help. My parents are both biologists. They met at work, and as they say, the rest is history. The place where they worked at the time was a government building dedicated to biology research used in government projects turned towards the public, meaning they were the ones studying the environment and making environmental protection laws based on their studies. This being a massive, old government building, it always had a security guard present, day and night. During the day, these security guards would mostly just stay at reception and greet people, but at night they would go do their rounds and make sure there were no intruders, obviously to prevent any science equipment or computers from being stolen. One of these guards is the let's not meet guy. Initially, he seemed like the nicest person. All the memories I have of him before this were of how friendly he was. He would greet me and talk to me in the nicest way every time my parents brought me to work. He would make me paper planes, which he was surprisingly good at, and throw them around with me, and he would stay with me at reception on the days my parents had to work into the night. Obviously, for me, that would get really boring, really fast, so he'd keep me company and entertain me. Mostly we would talk, play with the paper planes, and watch TV. It all seemed nice enough for my parents to trust him with me, which was probably their biggest mistake. One night, my parents had to work even later than usual. I think it was around 10 p.m. and they were still at it. So this guy, who was on the night shift, decided to take me around the building with him to do his rounds. We started on the top floor, checking all the rooms and the exterior part on the roof. Every room was so dark that I'd always stay a little behind and wait for him to turn on the lights. Then we stepped down to the second floor, where my parents' office and labs were. We checked the opposite side of the building, going into labs with massive extractors, microscopes, and every kind of science equipment you might think of. We walked down the stairs to the first floor, where most of the administration rooms were. I still remember seeing some maps on the walls and embalmed fish everywhere, serving as decorations. First floor was all clear, so it was time to check the 2 basement levels. I thought it would have made sense to check the labs on the right side first, as the left side had a flight of stairs at the end leading up to where my parents were, but for some reason he decided we'd go check that side first. We checked all the labs, but I noticed his pace was accelerating, and he was starting to look and sound happier. Excited, even. Once again, we checked all the labs, all the corners from one end to the other, turning the lights on ahead of us and turning them off behind us when we left. When we got to the last area, he turned all the lights on and we went inside. There were 3 separate offices on each side of the lab, and on the first one, he hurried towards the printer, opened it up, took out 2 pieces of paper and made 2 quick paper planes. That's when everything changed. He picked up one of the planes, went outside of the office, and threw it towards the end of the room. Then he told me the one he just threw was mine, and that we could throw them around in there. I ran to the other side of the room to pick my plane up, excited to play with it, and suddenly, the lights went off. When I turned around to check what was happening, I saw him getting out of the lab, turning the lights off and locking the door. I ran to the door, punched it and kicked it while screaming for him to open, panic taking over me because of how scared I was being in the dark at the time. Through the glass door, I could see him scurrying away in the corridors, turning the lights off as he went and disappeared after turning a corner. I'm pretty sure that everything I felt and every shadow and creepy monster I saw in there while waiting was part of my imagination because of how scared I was. I balled up against a corner and could see shadows moving around me in the dark. I could only cry, lost without knowing what was happening and why he was doing that. My parents finished their work eventually, and when they did, they packed up their things and made their way to the lobby to pick me up and go home. When they got there, the security guard was at reception, but I was nowhere to be found. They panicked, of course, must have shouted 100 different cuss words at the guy, and I'm not sure how my dad didn't murder him right then and there, but when they first asked the guy where the hell I was and what he had done with me, he simply said that he had gone to do the rounds with me and I must have gotten lost somewhere. This is a building that would take you about an hour and a half to check from top to bottom, even if you're rushing. So must have gotten lost somewhere is not exactly helpful. They looked for hours without finding me. It was only when I saw a light far at the end of the corridors leading to the lab I was in that I got the courage to stand up, rush towards the door, and start punching it as hard as I could. They finally found me there and made the guard unlock the door to get me out. I don't really remember sleeping that night, and if I did, it must have been out of exhaustion, but I know I made my mom stay in the bedroom with me the entire night. Of course, my parents made a complaint against the guard, and when they did and the guy started being investigated, he was fired and arrested. Not because of locking me away where he probably hoped no one would find me, but because he had been partnering up with other criminals to steal computers and equipment from the building. He had been selling them in some shady market along with the information in the hard drives to make money off it. By then, he had stolen a lot of old computers without anyone realizing, and who knows what his plans were for me that night. I'm not convinced that locking a crying child in the middle of the darkness, hidden away in some room, is exactly the most normal behavior if you're not trying to hide them and come get them later when everyone has left and sell them as part of your product. Luckily, he never had the chance to do that, and I really hope he never got to do it to any other kid.